Greetings everyone. We got a package in. You know what it is. You read the title. Let's get into it. So we got a set of speakers here. And Aiyima, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. But thanks Aiyama or Aiyima, however that's pronounced, for sending the speakers. They did send them to me for free to review. But as always, I'm going to give you my honest opinion of them. We got a package of goodies here. Look at. And some silica gel to eat a little later on. Oh, do not eat. No, never mind. So, I don't do as much reviews as I used to do. It's been 6 months since I did anything. I'm trying to be a little more selective in what I review, and I try to find something interesting. I thought these were interesting. So these are powered speakers. I've never reviewed a powered speaker before, and they seem to give you a lot here. You got volume, treble and bass, and a bunch of different inputs and some controls there. You get the HDMI ARC. That's nice. Of course, you get your RCA input. And I guess there's a Bluetooth connectivity as well. In our accessories box here we get the connector that links the speakers together. A remote control with real buttons, not that membrane crap. Looks like a RCA to 3.5mm jack there. Or connector. We have a USB. Looks like an optical cable. Power supply. Let's see what this says on it. As we gain focus here, it is 24 volts, 2 amps, 48 watts. So, I'm not sure what they rate these here. I think it's a lot more than that. So, yeah, we'll actually measure that. Here's the specifications. Just pause if you want to read all of that. Kind of optimistic with that low-end bass response there, 30 Hertz. As far as looks go, it's kind of a subjective thing. I'm okay with it. It's a departure from the rectangle speaker. I checked prices on these things on Ayima's website. I think they're like $229, but I've seen them on Amazon for $185, free shipping. So, you know, I think they're pretty well put together for the cost. You know, you're going to get vinyl veneer and a decent fit and finish, I would say. Still wondering about the ports. The one on the website and the one for sale on Amazon, at least the one I saw, has 2 ports down here, and this one has a port up here, so I'm not sure if maybe they changed the design since. I'm mostly concerned with sound quality. I'm not testing all the inputs and all that stuff. There's other reviews that will do that if you want to see that. I did hear something about the HDMI ARC where it wouldn't wake up the speaker when you put a signal through it, and they're supposed to have fixed that. So I don't know if that's been done or not. I don't have a way to test that. But anyhow, let's open this thing up and take a look at it. And put it on the Quantasylum there on my messy test bench there, and kind of curious as well as these sound and perform. I'm kind of wonder if they're using DSP, you know, kind of shaping the frequency response for the woofer and tweeter. So we'll take a look at that. Okay, pulled the board out here. It's a nice touch. They added some foam to the wires so they don't vibrate at certain frequencies and contribute to noise, you know, as they lay against the side of the cabinet. They might vibrate. So there are the amplifier chips. I don't know if I can get on that. I'm not familiar with that. And they have heat sinks, vertically oriented fins, which that's smart. I guess it's a date code, 2435 maybe, version 1. Yeah, I still wonder about the design of the cabinet, why the one I have has the port up here. It's a pretty long port. It goes in, curves down, and right here is the bottom of it. Here's the back of the woofer driver. It's got a decent sized ceramic magnet, vented pole piece, and it has their own branding on it, 2025-04-12. And you can see they put some fiber feel in there. Okay, I managed to get this out of the speaker, the infrared receiver. Not sure if this board will work without it. And in my parts box, I found a connector that plugs right in. So, it looks like they're using a simple crossover. There's a just a capacitor, a 3.3 microfarad non-polarized for the tweeter. See, each amp channel has 2 coils in their bridge, so just one output. So it looks like a simple capacitive crossover. Maybe they're using DSP to handle the rest of it. So enough conjecture. I guess I should test it and find out what exactly is going on. Okay, got it hooked up here. It's in standby mode. And I'm going into the load there, switch to 4 ohms because the base driver is 4 ohms. And the input is differentially measured because it is a bridge type amplifier. We got power here, so let's see if I can get anything to happen. Okay, I'm only going to measure one channel. It would be a bear to hook up the other one. I'd probably have to do some soldering. Anyhow, I don't think it would make much difference. We'll see really the same thing. But this is my kickoff test as usual, where I measure it at 1 watt of output power with a 1 kilohertz signal, just to kind of see how it does. Gain of the amplifier, I have it wide open, and it's about 31 dB. Distortion, well, not horrible, but not really impressive. It's 0.1%. I would really like to see it at 0.01 maybe, but that's what we get. Here is the frequency response. Looks quite wonky, doesn't it? Definitely using some DSP action there. Look at that. I mean, it's not huge, from 0, we're down to almost -3.5, -3.4 or so at the lowest point. So it looks like they got a low point here around 100 hertz. So maybe they're kind of tuning out that boxiness if there is that problem. Then they bring it up here a little bit for better bass response. And then they're rolling it off. I do have it set for music mode. It has 3 different settings. Then you can see here, so they're probably trying to flatten out the frequency response of the speaker. There's 1 kilohertz. Yeah, that's what I kind of thought they would do. I mean, they have that luxury with the built-in amplifier and the DSP, so they can, tailor the sound of the speaker frequency response with a little bit of programming there. So let me change the mode here. Let's go to movie mode, see what that looks like. Okay, after the thing settled down, it looks like we're getting a lot of bass, and there's a huge dip here around 1 kilohertz. It's going down below -6, and the highs are not as much as before. So yeah, for movie mode, they're trying to give you a bump in the bass, it looks like, and kind of a trough here around 1 kilohertz. So let's try what they're calling dialogue mode. Okay, dialogue mode, it looks like they're kind of bringing up the region between 100 and 1 kilohertz a little bit here. And they got all these bumps here, probably to tune the tweeter. And of course we have our bass and a little trough here, maybe to get rid of some of the boxiness. So what I did now is turn the treble control all the way down. The analyzer is going to bring the peak at 0. So what we're seeing is a big roll off above 1 kilohertz. You know, it starts to roll off down here, and we're losing about around -4 dB. So that's good. It's not harming the area below 1 kilohertz. So it's a pretty good treble control that only affects the higher end. Okay, now with the bass control turned all the way down, treble's set back to 0. And to be expected, it's rolling off the bass. Okay, this is power versus distortion. And this circuit might have an anti-clip feature. I know a lot of DSP stuff will detect clipping and back off. So we're starting at pretty low, down under 0.01, which would be, looks like we're around 0.02%, and it gently climbs up as we put more power into it. And 10, 20, 30 watts or so, you can see it just kind of stops at around 0.3%. So it might be its anti-clipping feature that detects distortion and prevents that. You can kind of see where it's folded back on itself. Yeah, I zoomed into that. You can see that it folded back in on itself, so it might be, you know, backing off power a little bit so it doesn't get into clipping. Okay, so now we're looking at frequency versus distortion. I ran this test at 2 watts. And you can see at 20 hertz, we're around 1%. And it drops down, you know, it's close to 0.1% here, around 50 or so. And it stays pretty low. Of course, it's a logarithmic graph. And we start climbing after 1 kilohertz. And at 20 kilohertz, we're just a bit over 1%. So I really wouldn't call it a hi-fi performance. I would like to see distortion below 0.1% to be considered hi-fi, and we're certainly above that the whole way. But at least in the important range around 1 kilohertz, where your ears are sensitive, the distortion is near its minimum. Okay, I got the speakers put back together. Before I did all this testing, I listened to them for a couple hours with various genres of music, and well, I found some interesting things which I will summarize at the end of the video, but I'll try to give you a little sampling of what they sound like with my music recorder. Of course, it never really works out that well because of room acoustics and everything, and you see I kind of have them angled outward, towed out, for a very good reason. But anyhow, let me carry on with the sample. so let's summarize my finding with these speakers. What do they sound like? I'm really impressed with them, actually. I'm quite surprised for the size of them. They give you pretty good bass response. In-room extension goes down to 35 hertz. No kidding. I'm really surprised for the the small driver size here. And they're not tiny speakers or anything, but still pretty impressive bass response. They're not going to be as tight as a sealed pair of speakers, but for what they are, they're very good. Another nice thing about it, I don't notice that boxy, hollow sound you get with inexpensive small speakers. None of that at all. And like I say, that's probably due to the DSP they're using to help correct for that. Another thing, when you crank up the volume, a lot of these small speakers will compress. I didn't really notice that. The bass came up with the volume even when I turned the bass control up. I'm not hearing a lot of compression with these. I mean, if I measured it, I probably would notice some, but with actual hearing, I'm just not noticing a lot of compression with the bass. To get the bass to sound more natural, though, I have to turn it down to about 10 o'clock. And it might vary with your listening room, how you set that, but I'm off the wall here. If you put these against the wall, you're probably going to have to turn the bass all the way down if you want a nice level response. But people who like bass, I think, will be impressed with these speakers. Somebody who wants a small speaker that's capable of producing bass, I think they'll be pretty happy with these. These speakers will get reasonably loud. And if you do crank them up, you don't have to worry about them clipping because they do have that anti-clip circuit. So the amplifier won't start distorting and clipping when you crank it up loud. They're not going to blow the roof off or anything. But yeah, I'd say they do get reasonably loud. Now, one big issue I found with these speakers, I noticed that before I run those tests because that's when I actually did all my listening, is a very narrow vertical dispersion of the sound. If you get out of that range, you start to get a lot of coloration to the sound. And the reason I think that's so is because of the way they crossed it over. So they're sending the full signal to the woofer and then using the capacitor to block the low frequencies to the tweeter. So in some of the treble range, both of the drivers are going to be playing the same signal. And you have to be at ear level, because if you get out of that range, you start getting a comb filtering effect that varies with frequency. So yeah, that's kind of an unfortunate flaw of the speakers. And another problem is when you force the low frequency driver to play those treble notes, it starts beaming the sound. It's kind of a narrow cone of sound that comes out at those higher frequencies. So to combat that, you have to set the speakers off axis. That's why I had them tilted out when I was recording them. Otherwise, you're getting beamed with that treble from the low frequency driver. So towing them out and maybe tweaking the bass and treble controls, you can tune it and get it to sound pretty good. But still an unfortunate cost-cutting measure of the speakers. It would make more sense to have two amplifiers, one for the treble, or one for the tweeter and one for the woofer, and properly cross them over. But that's going to add to the bill of materials, and they're not going to be sub $200 speakers anymore. The measured amplifier distortion is not really impressive, not going below 0.1%, but being around that in the critical frequency range is okay. Can you really hear 0.1%? I really can't hear anything. I think the speakers sound pretty good. So would I recommend the Aiyima S700 power speakers? Yes, I would. For the price point, I've not heard speakers that sound as good as these and deliver decent bass for their size. But like I said, the vertical dispersion issue, you'll have to experiment with positioning the speakers and the tone controls to get the best sound. Still, I'm really impressed with what they deliver. And you have a decent amount of connection options, including Bluetooth. So with that, I thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.